It's Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn. Getting into trouble as if trouble were his friend. It's Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn.
After we left Jackson Island, we just floated down the river, stopping days and going at night. We found some drift logs, and Jim fixed them up nice and comfortable into a raft and built a snug wigwam on it with a floor raised a foot or more above the raft so's the blankets and stuff wouldn't get wet. We tied the canoe at the back and just floated along with the current, catching fish now and then or shooting a waterfowl that got up too early in the morning. Take it all around, we lived mighty good. One night, after midnight, we had a big storm with a whole lot of thunder and lightning, and the rain poured down in a solid sheet. We stayed in the wigwam and left the raft to take care of itself. Hey, Jim, looky yonder.
Why, Huck, blamed if it ain't a steamboat that's done killed herself on a rock.
We're drifting straight for it, Jim. Let's land on her.
We better let blame well alone, Huck. Like as not, there's a watchman on that wreck.
Oh, there ain't nothing to watch, Jim. Come on.
I don't know, Huck.
And besides, we might find some things we can use. I can't rest, Jim, till we give her a rummaging. Do you reckon Tom Sawyer'd ever let a thing like this go by? You bet he wouldn't. He'd call it an adventure. Jim gave in, and we tied the raft to her and clung aboard. It was dark as pitch, except for the lightning, which come now and then. We were making for the captain's door when, by Jiminy, away down through the hall, we see a light and heard some voices, kind of low.
Who is that spirit? Whatever it is, a lie, Jim Turner, you mean ornery skunk.
I told you it weren't good judgment to come here, Huck. Let's go for the raft.
You go, Jim. I'll be along. I'm just a-boiling with curiosity. I'm gonna see what's going on.
You be careful, Huck, and don't get yourself killed again.
Well, I dropped on my hands and knees in the little passage and crept forward and sneaked into the room next to the voices. Through a crack, I see a man stretched on the floor, tied hand and foot, and two men standing over him with a lantern in his hand, and the other one with a pistol.
Don't do anything, Bill. I ain't ever gonna tell.
Indeed you ain't. If it was you standing here, Jim Turner, I know you wouldn't show no mercy.
Put up the pistol, Bill.
Oh, but Jake, you know he's a no-good, low-down skunk.
I can't argue with you there, Bill, but I've got my reasons. Now put away your gun.
Bless you, Jake Packard. I'll never forget you for that, long as I live.
Which may not be very long.
Now come here a minute, Bill.
Well, the two men were making for the room I was in, and I was cornered, and sorry now I come. I didn't hardly breathe. I was so scared.
Now, I know as well as you, Bill, that Turner's going to rat on us if he gets out of here.
That's what I've been a-telling you.
Hold on. You listen to me. Let's just leave him tied and skedaddle. It ain't a-gonna be more than a couple hours before this wreck breaks up and washes down the river.
All right, Jake, but it's too darn slow for me.
Let's get the loot and get out of here.
When they went back to where the man was tied up, I lit out, all in a cold sweat, and scrambled back to where Jim was awaiting. Jim! Jim!
Right here, Huck.
Quick, Jim. It ain't no time for fooling around and moaning. There's a rough gang aboard. Untie the raft and let's get.
Morning, Huck. Raft? There ain't no raft no more. She done broke loose and gone, and here we is.
Oh. Say, Jim, let's see if we can find the boat the gang come on and smooch it before they leave. Well, we crept around trying to find the canoe the gang had brought. But when we spied it, they was already there.
You all ready, Bill? Shove her off.
Hold it, Jake. You search Turner?
No, didn't you?
No, I thought you done it. So you got scared as hell.
Well, let's get
In don't suppose he's gonna need it.
Hurry, Jim. Let's go before they get back.
Rope's cut, Huck. Keep down.
We went gliding swift along, dead silent. And pretty soon the darkness soaked her up, every last sign of her. We were safe and known it. Then we saw a light on the deck and knew they'd missed their boat, and was beginning to understand that they was in just as much trouble now as Jim Turner was. By and by, a flash of lightning showed us a black thing ahead, floating, and we made for it. It was the raft, and we was mighty glad to get aboard again. Next morning, when we began turning over all the things the gang had stole off the wrecked steamboat, we began to see we was nearly rich, with boots and blankets, and even a spyglass, and a lot of books. I read considerable to Jim about kings and dukes and such.
Say, Huck, how much do a king get?
Get? Why, they get $1,000 a month if they want it. Everything belongs to them.
And what they got to do, Huck?
Well, they don't do nothing. Why, how you talk? They just sit around.
No. Is that so?
Sure. They just lazy round or go hawking maybe. But mostly they hang around the harem.
Round the what?
The harem. The place where he keeps his wives. Don't you know about the harem? Solomon had one. He had about 1,000,000 wives.
Most likely they has rackety times in the nursery. They say Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. But I don't take no stock in that. Would a wise man want to live in the midst of such a blim-blamming all the time?
Well, Solomon was the wisest man, Jim. The widow said so.
I don't care, Huck. He had some of the dad-fetchingest ways I ever see. Does you know about that child that he was going to chop into?
Sure. The widow told me all about it.
Well, then, that weren't the work of no wise man. Why, Huck, if two women claims the same child, what does I do? I shin around amongst the neighbors and find out who the child belongs to and hand it over to the right one all safe and sound. But what does Solomon do? He says he's going to give half a child to each woman. What's the use of half a child?
But hang it, Jim, you clean missed the point. Solomon knew the real mother.
No, Huck. I reckon I know sense when I sees it. And there's no sense in such doings as that. The dispute wasn't about half a child, but about a whole child. And the man that thinks he can settle a dispute about a whole child with half a child don't know enough to come in out of the rain.
But, Jim, that ain't what Solomon was trying to do at all.
I reckon I knows what I knows. The trouble is with the way Solomon was raised. You take a man that's only got 1 or 2 children. Is he going to be wasteful of children? No, he can't afford it. He knows how to value 'em. But you take a man that's got around 5 million children running around the house, why, a child or 2 more or less, wasn't no consequence to Solomon. That fetch him. Say, there ain't no kings here, is there, Huck?
I don't think so. I read summers that maybe some who are going to be kings come to America.
But what do they do here when there ain't no jobs for kings?
Oh, I guess some of them gets on the police force, or some of them teach people how to talk French. I don't know.
Don't the French people talk the same way we does, Huck?
No, Jim, you couldn't understand a word they said. Not a word.
Well, I'll be ding busted. How did that happen?
I don't know. I saw some of their jabber in a book once. Suppose a man was to come to you and say, "Parlez-vous Franzi?" What would you think?
I wouldn't allow nobody to call me that.
Shucks, it ain't calling you anything. It's only saying, "Do you know how to talk French?"
Well then, why couldn't he just say it?
Well, he is a-saying it. That's a Frenchman's way of saying it.
Well, it's plain ridiculous. There's no sense in it.
Looky here, Jim. Does a cat talk like we do?
No, a cat don't.
Well, does a cow?
No, a cow don't neither.
Well, does a cat talk like a cow or a cow talk like a cat?
No, they don't.
Well, it's natural and right for 'em to talk different from each other and to talk different from us, ain't it?
Course it is, Huck.
Well, then, why ain't it natural and right for a Frenchman to talk different from us? You answer me that.
Is a cat a man, Huck?
No.
Well, then there ain't no sense in a cat talking like a man. Is a cow a man, or is a cow a cat?
Course not, Jim.
Well, then she ain't got no business to talk like either one or the other of 'em. Is a Frenchman a man, Huck?
Yes, sure.
Well, then, dad blame it, why don't he talk like a man? You answer me that.
Huckleberry, Huckleberry, Huck and his friend Jim caught up in a boat wreck, but get away again. Then talk about the kings and dukes and wise old Solomon, and why the French talk differently, although they talk like men.
We judged that 3 more nights would fetch us to Cairo, at the bottom of Illinois, where the Ohio River comes in. And that was what we was after. We planned to sell the raft and canoe and get on a boat and go way up the Ohio, amongst the free states, and be out of trouble, so's nobody could sell Jim into slavery again. Well, we was humping along just fine, when the second night we got into some thick fog. We lit the lantern when we heard a steamboat pounding along, but we didn't see her good till she was close. She was a big one, and she was coming in a hurry, too, looking like a black cloud with rows of glowworms around it. Jim, she's aimed right for us.
She's going to hit us, Huck. Die!
I dived all right, and I aimed to find the bottom, too, because a 30-foot wheel had to go over me, and I wanted it to have plenty of room. When I bounced to the top, I was nearly busted. I sung out for Jim about a dozen times, but I didn't get any answer. But you couldn't see or hear much in all that fog, especially after the boat started her engines again and went churning along the river. I grabbed a plank and struck out for shore, pushing it ahead of me. I was a good long time in getting over, but I made it and clumb up the bank. I couldn't see much with the darkness and fog and all, but I went poking along over some rough ground and run across a big old-fashioned double log house before I noticed it. I was going to sneak by, but a pack of dogs jumped out and went to howling and barking at me. And I knowed better than to move another peg.
Got you, dogs. Who's there?
It's me,
Me? Who's me?
George Jackson, sir.
Well, what do you want?
I don't want nothing, sir. I only want to get along by, but your dogs won't let me.
What you prowling around this time of night for, hey?
I wasn't prowling around, sir. I fell overboard off on the steamboat.
Oh, you did you? Strike it like this, somebody. What'd you say your name was?
George Jackson, sir. I'm only a boy.
Tom, fetch your guns. Say, George Jackson, there anybody with you?
No, sir, nobody.
Snatch that light away, Betsy, you old fool. Ain't you got no sense? Keep out of sight. Bob, you ready? You ready, Tom?
Ready? Ready.
Now, George Jackson, you know the Shepherdsons?
No, sir. I never heard of them.
Well, step forward, boy. Come mighty slow. Push the door open yourself. Easy now. There. That's enough. Now put your head in.
Why, he ain't a Shepherdson. That's for sure. Put your guns away.
Why, the poor thing's as wet as he can be, and hungry, I bet.
You're right, Rachel. Take care of him.
Get Buck to bring some of his dry clothes. He's about the same size as this boy.
Well, here's Buck now. kinda sleepy yet and a-dragging his gun.
Ain't there no Shepherdsons around?
No, it was a false alarm.
Well, if there'd have been some, I reckon I'd get one.
Why, Buck, they might have scalped us all. You been so slow in coming.
Well, I told them a yarn about how I was an orphan and hadn't nobody in the world, and they said I could have a home there as long as I wanted. So they fed me and took me upstairs and gave me dry clothes and said I was to sleep in the room with Buck. Finally, everybody went back to bed, and when I waked up in the morning, drat it all, I'd forgot what my name was. When Buck finally waked up, I says, can you spell, Buck?
Sure.
I bet you can't spell my name.
Oh, I bet I can too.
All right, go ahead.
George. Jackson. George Jackson. There now.
Well, you done it, but I didn't think you could. It ain't no slouch of a name to spell right off without studying. Well, I was glad to get my new name again, and I put it down private in case somebody might want me to spell it. I found out that I was took in by the Grangerfords, and what a handsome lot of quality they was. Old Colonel Grangerford was a real gentleman, very tall and very slim. Bob was the eldest son, and Tom next. Tall, beautiful men, with broad shoulders and brown faces and long black hair and black eyes. Gentlemen, like their pa. The daughters was tall and proud and grand and mighty beautiful, too. Buck, the youngest, and me, we got along just fine. They must have had about 100 slaves and a lot of other property, and lived in high style. One day, when we was out in the woods hunting, we heard a horse coming.
Quick, jump for cover.
Who's coming, Buck?
I'm hoping it's a Shepherdson. Now get down. Why, it is. It's Harney Shepherdson.
Hey, it looks like he's been over near your place, Buck.
Well, he'll be sorry he did. Look at him ride.
You shot his hat off, Buck. Did you mean to shoot him?
You bet I did. I just missed. I wonder why he didn't come after me. It ain't like a Shepherdson to ride away.
What'd he do to you, Buck?
Him? He never done nothing to me.
Well, then what you want to shoot him for?
Why, only on account of the feud.
Feud? What in tarnation's a feud?
Why, where was you raised? Don't you know what a feud is?
Never heard of it afore.
Well, a feud's this way. A man has a quarrel with another man and starts shooting. Then, the other man, well, he starts shooting. Pretty soon, the brothers on both sides go for one another. Then the cousins chip in, and by, everybody's killed off. And there ain't no more feud. But it's kind of slow. Takes a long time.
Well, that's blame ridiculous. Has this feud been going on long, Buck?
Well, I should reckon more than 30 years, I calculate.
What was the first trouble about, Buck?
Why, how should I know?
Well, who done the shooting? Was it a Grangerford or a Shepherdson?
Oh, laws, I don't know. It was so long ago.
Well, that beats me, Buck. Has there been many killed?
You bet. A right smart chance of funerals. Pa's got a few buckshot in him, too. But he don't mind it, 'cause they don't weigh much.
Well, I couldn't see no sense in such foolishness. But then, I didn't grow up among such quality. Why, next to the Colonel, Pap didn't show no more quality than a mudcat. So how could I know about such doings as feuds? church.
Hey, here's a riddle. Where was Moses when the candle went out?
I don't know. I never heard about it.
But guess, can't you? It's easy.
Which candle?
Oh, why any candle?
I don't know. Where was he?
Why, he was in the dark.
Ah,
Hey, there come the Shepherdsons.
do they go to your church, Buck?
Sure they do. Every Sunday. Why, their family and our family, we keep this church plumb filled every Sunday.
Both families had their guns along, so it looked more like a turkey shoot than a Sunday school. It was pretty ornery preaching, all about brother love and such, and it did seem to me to be one of the roughest Sundays I'd ever run across. Afterwards, we strolled home and had dinner and just lazied around. When I went upstairs to take a nap, there was Miss Sophie standing in her door.
George Jackson, would y'all do me a favor? You like me, don't you?
Oh, sure, ma'am. What is it?
Well, I left my Bible back at the church. Would you go and fetch it for me?
Yes, sure.
Oh, don't say anything to anybody, will you?
No, ma'am. I slid out and slipped off up the road, and there weren't anybody at the church except maybe a hog or two. If you notice, most folks only go to church when they got to, but a hog is different. Well, anyway, I found the Bible, and when I picked it up, a little piece of paper fell out. There was some writing on it, in pencil. 2:30. I shoved it back in and went home and gave the Bible to Miss Sophie. She looked in the Bible till she found the paper, and as soon as she read it, she looked glad. Was the paper important, Miss Sophie?
Did you read it?
Oh, no, ma'am.
No, it wasn't anything. Just a bookmark.
Well, I didn't think much about it. I went out to play, and one of the slaves come up to me and asked me if I want to see a whole stack of snakes down in the swamp. I didn't have nothing else to do, so I followed him about half a mile through some thick trees and vines, and when we got to the place, there was a man laying there asleep. And by jingo, it was old Jim. Jim! Why, I didn't expect to see you alive again.
Oh, Huck, there you is.
Ain't you surprised to see me, Jim?
I knowed you was with the Grangerfords. The slaves have been a-hiding me here in the swamp. They told me all about you, Huck.
Well, why didn't you send them to fetch me sooner, Jim?
Well, I've been a-patching up the raft nights and...
What raft, Jim?
Why, our old raft.
You mean to say it warn't smashed all to flinders?
Yeah, she was tore up a good deal, but these here slaves found it. It just about fixed up, Huck.
Well, the next morning, I was just waking up, thinking about how me and Jim should skip out, and I noticed it was mighty still around the house. Nobody stirring. I went downstairs. Nobody was there. Only the slave what took me down to find Jim. What's going on, Jack?
What? Don't you know?
No, what? Where's everybody?
Well, Miss Sophie's run off. She run off in the night sometime. Nobody don't know just when. Run off to get married to that young Harney Shepherdson. Leastways, so they spec.
And have the men gone after him and Buck too?
Yep. And the women folks have gone to stir up the relations. I reckon there's going to be some mighty rough times.
Well, now I knew about that note. I took for the river as hard as I could put. By and by, I began to hear guns a good ways off. There were men cavorting around on their horses, yelling and shooting. I hid by the river most of the day watching the feud. I ain't a-going to tell all that I saw. It'd make me sick again if I was to do that. Finally, toward dark, I found Jim down in the swamp, and I told him what had happened. I cried when I told him that Buck was dead. I wished I hadn't ever come ashore that night to see such things. Folks sometimes do the ding-bustin'est crazy thing. It's enough to make a buddy ashamed of the human race. Well, we lit out on the raft for the big water as fast as we could, feeling awful sad.